A belated Happy New Year to you, and welcome to a brand new season of the Derek Diamond Experience podcast. And I can't think of a better way to kick off the year than with one last look back at 2023 in my top 5 movies of the year. If you've never watched or listened to a top 5 episode of this show, it's real simple. I put a post out on social media, usually Facebook, and tell you what the top 5 list is going to be for that month. Ask for your list. You leave them in the comments, and I will read them on the show. I don't really have any honorable mentions, though I do have some that I'll mention throughout reading your lists as ones that, I thought maybe were overrated or underrated as far as movies go, because there were a lot of good movies that came out in 2023. But my top 5 is one of the 2 most recent movies that I saw, and that would be Barbie. And I know Barbie came out back during the summer, but I didn't get a chance to see it in theaters. Finally got to watch it whenever it dropped on Max. And I have to say, it surpassed my expectations. I didn't have lofty expectations going into it, but I didn't necessarily have low expectations either, because most everyone I know that has watched it has said it was really good. And it was, to me, what the movie needed to be. I think it was a very smart movie. Some people might disagree with me in that, and that the movie seemed very anti-male. Could you make that argument? Sure, but I didn't really perceive it in that way. I actually thought it was a very smart movie with and there's spoilers for these movies. If you haven't seen them, then go watch them and then come back and listen to the podcast. I thought it was very well written in the sense that all the Barbie characters were in their own world, and their appearance or their mindset was a reflection on the people who played with them. I thought that was really cool. And then, of course, seeing Barbie and Ken in the real world in Los Angeles was hilarious. I thought Margot Robbie and Ryan Gosling did a fantastic job as Barbie and Ken. The sets, especially in Barbie Land, were incredible. I thought it was a really funny, really smart movie. And yeah, was it my favorite movie? No, but it's definitely up there and managed to crack into the top 5. My number 4 is Guardians of the Galaxy 3. Of course, James Gunn's climax of his trilogy that he's done with the Guardians of the Galaxy characters. I have loved this franchise ever since it was introduced, now coming up on 10 years ago, which is crazy to say. But this was my favorite of the 3. And the reason why I say that is because it still had the humor, it still had the camaraderie, but it had more emotion. And to me, it felt more like an emotional investment than the first 2. With Volume 2, you had Ego, who turned out to be Peter Quill's father. You had that dynamic. The first Guardians of the Galaxy is one of the most fun movies in the MCU. Really brought me back to that fun 80s sci-fi type of film. But I wasn't expecting this to be the emotional roller coaster that it was. And I enjoyed how it ended, with Rocket taking over the group, Peter going to Earth to spend time with his family. I thought it ended the trilogy in a really nice way. And it still wasn't, as I mentioned, it still had its humor. It had one of the better villains in the MCU, the High Revolutionary. I enjoyed getting Rocket's backstory. Just an overall great, great movie. My number 3 is one of 2 animated movies that made my list, and that would be Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Mutant Mayhem. I have been a huge fan of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles since I was a kid. Loved the cartoon. The original live-action movie is actually the first movie I ever saw in the theater, or at least that I remember seeing. I had all the toys, all of it. Huge Ninja Turtles fan. So with every iteration of the Turtles, I'm going to go in with a vested interest because I love that property. And I knew that this was going to be a different type of movie or Turtles movie from the trailers. I enjoyed that they got, actual teenagers to voice the turtles. I love that they acted like teenagers, and they acted like, modern day teenagers, from my experience with them anyway. Enjoyed the new takes on April O'Neil, on Master Splinter. I actually liked that Shredder wasn't the villain. Now, he did make an appearance in the mid-credit scene, but I liked the Superfly character. I enjoyed the incorporation of Bebop and Rocksteady and, a lot of the other classic characters from the Ninja Turtles. And I'm really excited to see what they do with the sequel. And, people might have asked me, were you upset at some of the changes that were made to the Turtles' origins? The most notable one that I took away from it being that, Splinter didn't know karate from his master Hamato Yoshi. He watched an instructional video, and that's how he and the Turtles learned martial arts. And I look at it as this is a different version of the Turtles. It's in a different world, a different universe. And that's what I like about these reboots. And I know a lot of people complain about them, but at least with this version of the Turtles, they did something different and we didn't get the exact same thing. I really, really enjoyed that. And I love the soundtrack. The animation was gorgeous. It's a really fun time. I will say the movie theater experience for that day when my wife and I went was not so enjoyable, but it did not deter me from enjoying the movie. My number 2 is the Super Mario Brothers movie. I cannot tell you how much fun Samantha and I had watching this in the theater. I can still remember the travesty of the live-action Mario movie from back in the day, and here we are 30 years later, and we've finally gotten a new movie. And it was, to me, exactly what it needed to be. It bounced around a lot. The movie moves very fast, but I was okay with that because they threw in a lot of references and a lot of universe building, in a very short amount of time. And a lot of people were critical of the choices of the voice actors, most notably Chris Pratt. I thought he was fine as Mario. Like in the very beginning, you could tell that it was Chris Pratt, but I was like, okay, it's just Mario. It's Chris Pratt as Mario. It's okay. I thought Jack Black was absolutely incredible as Bowser. Of course, myself and everybody else, we love the Peaches song. It's a travesty that it's not nominated for an Oscar, but what can you do? I loved this movie, and for a while it was my number 1 until I watched my number 1, and of course it's Oppenheimer. I'm recording this Monday, January 8th. I watched Oppenheimer yesterday on the 7th. So in a way, you're kind of getting my raw reaction to it. I've had about a day to really sit on it. But I heard so much about this movie when it came out. It's, movie of the year, one of the best movies of the decade, maybe even of this century so far. And I believe all of it. Cillian Murphy did an amazing job as Oppenheimer. Robert Downey Jr. should absolutely win Best Supporting Actor for his role in the film. As a filmmaker, I loved it even more than I enjoyed it as a fan because everything about it from top to bottom was great. The acting, the cinematography, the set designs, the lighting, the score, the sound mix. Like, I don't know what else you could say about it. Like, everything... You could make the argument that maybe it was a little too long. I wouldn't necessarily argue with anybody on that, but I loved it. I absolutely loved Oppenheimer. It surpassed my expectations and is one of the best movies that I think I've ever seen. It's definitely in the best movies of the decade. I will say that. Maybe if I'm still doing the show in 2030, maybe I'll do a top 5 movies from the 2020s. That would be really interesting to see where that would rank. I mean, right now I would say it's probably number one, but it's a masterpiece. And if Christopher Nolan doesn't win an Oscar for Best Director for this movie, the Academy went wrong somewhere, which they've done that a lot, but that's a whole separate podcast. But I absolutely loved Oppenheimer. Seeing the bomb go off was art. It was a complete work of art, and I loved it. So it was without a doubt my number one movie of 2023. So now we'll get into your list. Again, when I do these top 5 lists, I make a post on Facebook at facebook.com/ddiamondpodcast. If you want to participate, you just leave your list in the comments. You can also email them to me, ddiamondpodcast@gmail.com, or you can message me on Facebook, and I'll add it to the list. First up, we have Carlos Longoria, of course, over at the Nerd Cave Retro Podcast. We call him I Am the Rampage. In no particular order this time, Elemental, which I haven't seen all of it yet, but I've heard good things. Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse, Guardians of the Galaxy 3, Barbie, and Leave the World Behind. He says this was the last movie we watched in 2023, started watching it around 10 p.m. on December 31st, and finished just around midnight. I know a lot of people didn't care for the ending of Leave the World Behind. I understood what they were going for. It may have cracked my top 10, but I enjoyed it. Like, the cast was great. I thought they were all really good. I liked that it was, it had this broad scale problem, but it still felt like a very intimate setting because there weren't a lot of varying locations, if that makes sense. I did want to throw in Across the Spider-Verse. So I liked the movie. I didn't love it as much as I thought I would, and as much as a lot of people I know did. It's still a very good movie. I personally like Into the Spider-Verse more. And I don't know because I saw this opening weekend, I don't know if it was because I was really tired at the time that I watched it, but it felt like it dragged way too long. And a 2.5-hour animated movie, that's a lot to ask for me. Like, I know it has its older audience, but with animation, I think you got to factor in the majority of your audience is going to be a little younger. But I still enjoyed the movie. I do want to give it another watch through to see if, maybe it was just because I was really exhausted. Who knows? But I still enjoyed the movie. Next up, we have Mr. Christian Jones. Number 5, Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. Number 4, Spider-Verse. 3, Barbie. 2, TMNT Mutant Mayhem. And number 1 is Oppenheimer. If I had to give an award to most underrated movie of 2023, it would be Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. This came out at a time that I was really wanting to just see a silly, fun, fantasy-type movie. And this fit the bill to a T. Is it a cinematic masterpiece? No. But I say this all the time. Not every movie has to be Oppenheimer. You can have your concise movies that are like an hour and a half or 2 hours long, and they're just fun times at the movies. And that's exactly what Dungeons & Dragons: Honor Among Thieves was to me. I laughed many times through that movie, and I want to see it again at some point. Like I said, if we were doing awards, it would get most underrated movie of the year, bar none. Wally Phelps, I didn't see a whole lot of movies this year, but number 5, Disney's Haunted Mansion. 4, Barbie. 3, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. 2, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. And number 1, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles: Mutant Mayhem. I liked Haunted Mansion. I know it got a mixed response when it came out too, but again, like Dungeons & Dragons, I thought it was a fun movie. That's I got out of Haunted Mansion what I was hoping to get out of it, and that was just like Dungeons and Dragons, a fun time at the movies. So I enjoyed Haunted Mansion. It probably would have cracked the top 10 if we were doing a top 10 list. Jason Robbins, in no particular order. Number 5, TMNT Mutant Mayhem. 4, Evil Dead Rise. 3, Guardians of the Galaxy 3. 2, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And number 1, Super Mario Brothers. First time we're seeing Indiana Jones on the list. And is it as good as the original trilogy? No. But it is vastly better than what we got with Kingdom of the Crystal Skull many years ago. Not that that would be really challenging, but I liked it. You know, it was like an old school fun summer blockbuster that you felt like you were on an adventure with the world's greatest adventurer. And I thought it was a pretty good way to send Indiana Jones out. Again, was it perfect? No. But I enjoyed it. And I find that a lot of movies now are getting very mixed responses, which, you know, is not a bad thing. But I find that, and it's like that with everything, you know, you have those people that are staunchly against something, and then if you disagree with them, then you're wrong and you can't be friends anymore. I don't have that mentality. I liked Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. Again, that would have been an honorable mention, or, you know, it might have been around like the 7 or 8 spot on a top 10 list. Next up, we have Jeremy Branch. I struggled big time with lists, but these all really had an impact. Number 5, Sanctuary. 4, Killers of the Flower Moon. 3, Godzilla -1. Number 2, John Wick 4. And number 1, Oppenheimer. I have not seen Killers of the Flower Moon yet, though I do want to. Godzilla -1, I've heard nothing but amazing things about. I do want to watch that sooner rather than later. I've only watched the first John Wick movie, so I've got some catching up to do with that. And Sanctuary, I have not seen yet. Jonathan McIntosh, listed at random. Number 5, Renfield. That was another fun movie. Say what you will about Nicolas Cage movies, but I thought it was a fun take on the Count Dracula story. And plus, you know, I recognized some people that I've even had on this podcast before because it was filmed in New Orleans. Number 4, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning. Number 3, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3. Number 2, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And number 1, Barbie. I'm far behind on the Mission Impossible movies, too. I've heard they keep getting better. So at some point, there's just so much to watch that it's hard to watch everything. It's really impossible to do it, honestly. And last but not least, we have Mr. Wade Vatican. My submission for the top 5 list. Number 5, Dungeons & Dragons Honor Among Thieves. Number 4, TMNT Mutant Mayhem. Number 3, Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1. Number 2, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And number 1, the Super Mario Brothers movie. And of course, he throws in Peaches, 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 Peaches. That song's going to be stuck in my head now for the rest of the night, but I'm not complaining about it. That's a really solid list. I mentioned Mission Impossible. I haven't seen that yet, but you know, I can vouch for really all these lists. You know, there's a few that I have not seen, but no, these were really good lists, and a couple that I didn't mention. I do really want to see the Iron Claw. It's the wrestling biopic about the Von Erich brothers. I've heard really good things about it. I just haven't had a chance to go see it yet. That may have wound up being on my list, or at least an honorable mention. I haven't seen Mission Impossible yet. Haven't seen Killers of the Flower Moon, Godzilla -1. So there's still quite a few things that I have not seen, but you know, I think that happens every year with these types of lists, or even if you talk amongst friends about your favorite movies of the year, there's always those couple that you didn't get a chance to see. But it comes with the territory. So thank you to everyone for submitting your list. Again, if you want to be a part of the top 5 list, be on the lookout sometime in February, maybe early February, for a post on Facebook, facebook.com/DDiamondPodcast. And just leave your list in the comments and I'll read them on the show.